Hello, I am Mystic Orange and this is video hashtag 622. In this video, I'm continuing with my Winx Club rewrite. Make sure to like, share and subscribe. And make sure to check out the previous episodes of my Winx Club rewrites. My last episode was episode 4, Welcome to Magix. So I guess this is episode 5. However, I didn't realize that last episode was like more than 1 hour long. I do apologize if the video was longer than you was hoping for. So basically in the last episode, it was mostly like me talking about Althea, the staff of Althea, the subjects that is taught in Althea, and everything else, like the dormitory and everything else. So for this episode, I think I want to talk about the geography of Magix. So expanding beyond Althea, basically. So all that considered, let's continue with this video. Season 1, Episode 5, The Geography of Magix. I've chosen this title because since we're talking about the world building of Magix even more, I think it's fitting that I call it Geography of Magix, since basically that's what I'm doing. For this episode is going to be the 6th of September. The last episode was 5th of September, and this episode is continuation from the last episode. Since last episode, Professor Faragonda explained the world building of Althea and everything else within Althea. And ultimately, Professor Faragonda couldn't explain the world building of the rest of Magix. So therefore, that's what this episode is for, hopefully. And I hope this video isn't more than 1 hour long, but I can't control what happens. So if you remember Winx Club Season 1 Episode 2, there was a scene with the teachers at the beginning. So the start of this episode, I want to capture that part of the episode. So we're going to start off the episode. It's a bright sunny autumn day. The birds are chirping and the music is playing. Some students are vibing inside the school while others are vibing outside of the schools. Well, it's kind of morning right now. So the year 8s, year 9s, year 10s and year 11s are vibing around the schools, obviously, but the year 7s are heading to the assembly hall. This is so that they learn about geography. And then we get the footage of the window of a teacher's staff room. And then it fades to the staff room. Right now in the staff room, we have Professor Palladium, who is a potionology teacher. Professor Dufour, who is the music teacher. Professor Whiskers, who is the transfiguration teacher. Professor Sunflower, the herbology teacher. And Professor Plum, the technomagic teacher. So while we're at the staff room, we have these 5 teachers. The other teachers are probably elsewhere in the school. And I think I'm going to have this scene start off with Professor Sunflower and Professor Palladium talking to each other. So basically, in the Focus version, we're going to have that bit where like Professor Dufour and Palladium talking to each other. But instead of being Dufour, I'm going to have Professor Sunflower talking. So in this bit, Professor Sunflower is talking to Professor Palladium. She's saying hi, and they're exchanging pleasantries and talking about what they did for the summer. So Professor Palladium went to our conference meeting throughout the summer. And Professor Sunflower was the person, who turned sunflowers into sundaes. Because I think it fits her, since, she's a herbology teacher, and she's the one who would be turning sunflowers into sundaes. She said that she did this with some kids in a granola realm. And then we're going to have the signaling bit of this conversation. This is where I'm going to have Professor Dufour talking to Professor Plum. So Professor D4 and Professor Plum are looking outside the window, and they're seeing students outside their schools. And Professor D4 misses being a student in her old school. And then we're gonna have Professor Whiskers standing behind them, like he can't even see what's happening outside the window. And so we're gonna have the signaling bit where like he turns into a rabbit and he lands on Professor D4. And while he does that, Professor D4 gets shocked and she faints to the ground because she didn't realize what was happening. And then Professor Plum tells, Professor Whiskers to be more careful with his magic. For the next scene, we're gonna have the Year 7s heading towards the assembly hall. Like, so just imagine Bloom and her friends heading towards it. But of course, they're gonna chat with each other while they go there. So the students arrive and they sit in the assembly hall. They wait for the professor to arrive. I think for this assembly presentation, I think it's important for Professor Ripley to do this. Since she is the Geography of Magic's teacher, I also think it's important for the other staffs to sit this one out, especially Professor Fargonda, who is the headmistress of Althea, and she would probably focus her attention of the rest of the school. So Professor Ripley arrives, and she's gonna present Geography of Magic's lesson with you. So you're getting a free lesson in geography right here, right now. So just so you know, this is 6th of September. This is the second day, so it's probably a Tuesday. And this is the week 1 of the school year. So usually at this point, the students of Year 7s would probably be learning literature by now. But since this is a temporary occasion, instead of having the literature class, they're going to have this free Geography of Magic's class. So Professor Shakespeare can have a free time. So Professor Ripley guides the students to the presentation board. So this is where, Professor Ripley and arguably me explaining the world building towards the viewers. I think it's important to highlight where the students are right now. So where are the students based? Well, first of all, let's explain the school. The school is Althea Fairy School. I think I've mentioned this a couple of times. It's a school based in a planet called Magix. However, Althea Fairy School isn't the only school in Magix. In fact, this school is home to many schools. And I think it's important to explain this planet overall. So Magix, the planet of sci-fi, fantasy, and all things magical. It's a popular planet which most people across the magical universe usually favor towards. It's understandable because the planet is the most diverse and most fun, which is why it gets so many attractions. But what does Magix look like? So this is how I would describe it. So imagine the real Earth, but it's magical, and magical rings around it. The rings around it, represent magic and sci-fi and fantasy, and, it brings all the magic towards the planet. So basically Earth, but a bit more sparkly and fancy. And like I said in my last episode, I'm gonna use the world map as a guide to explain the areas about Magix and other planets. I'm gonna use this map to, guide through the other planets as well. So just like Earth, Magix also has continents. However, they're not called continents, they're called regions. And so Magix has 9 regions, kind of similar looking to the real Earth. So therefore, I'm going to explain each 9 regions. So the first region is called Light Rock. So where is this based? This region is based in where the Arctic would be in the real Earth. So geographically, Light Rock is equivalent to the Arctic. So if you remember in season 2, this is basically where the tricks went, in episode 2. So to expand on that, Light Rock is a heavenly region from Magix. It's basically paradise. People can go there for self-actualizations. Also, this region is home to high spiritual beings. So if you remember in season 3 where Stella goes and meets the ice spirits, well, those ice spirits will be based in this region called the Light Rock. Other similar beings will be here as well. Additionally, this is where the Barrier Mountain is based. I kind of had a thought about what Region 2 would be, and I had an idea. I think I'm gonna call it the Shadow Hunt. I guess Shadow Hunt. And I'm gonna place it where the Antarctica would be in the real world. So basically, it's like the hellish area. So while Light Rock is the heavenly area, Shadow Hunt is the hellish area. And I guess this is where Lord Darkhar's citadel is based, and it's home to the Shadow Flame. Just to be aware, the Shadow Flame is always eternal, nothing can distinguish it. Same way as the Dragon Flame, nothing can distinguish that either. However, these things can be contained. And right now, the Shadow Flame is contained within the region of the Shadow Hunt. It should be contained in a box within the chamber. Don't break it, or else the Shadow Flame will be released and, it will cause destruction. Hopefully a clumsy oath doesn't accidentally break it and turns into a skeletal knight. Hint, hint. Also, by the way, we will have people who live down there in Shadowhunt, but just because you're from Shadowhunt doesn't mean you're evil. So people from Downland, they would be based in that region. Additionally, I did not want to call it Underworld. I think Shadowhunt is a much superior name. Also, I think there's so many media that use Underworld as a place in their realms. Like, I'm sure this is based on the Greek mythology, and I'm sure, like, in the Disney universe, they have their own world called the Underworld, and this is where Hades will be based. As well as in shows like Magi Nation, the hellish place where they are from is called the Car. But there is another region called Underneath, which isn't really like a hellish area. So on that basis, this is why I wanted to call it Shadow Hunt. And I didn't want places like Light Rock and Shadow Hunt be easily accessible for the Winx girls. Like, you have to remember that Magix is a planet, and not everything in your planet is accessible. Also, additionally, Shadow Hunt is a monarchic region. So this is where the downland systems will have like a monarchy in the region. So like Princess Imentia sponsors, them lot. That's where they're based. And just like the other planets, Magix is also a monarchy planet. Kind of like how Earth has a monarchy of its own as well. Like in the UK, Queen Elizabeth is like the Queen of, UK, but, she did pass away. Right now, I think King Charles is the next king of England. So I've covered the first 2 regions. Time to cover the other 7 regions. I think I'm going to use this hexagonal grid as a guide. So the third region is called Fairyland. So Fairyland is geographically equivalent to Europe. So by looking at the world map, I think I want the region to be lower than Light Rock. Like, how Europe is lower than the Arctic, so I want it similar to that. So the most civilians of Fairyland are, basically fairies, but of course there are going to be exceptions. We have all kinds of fairies, modern, ancient, unique ones, specific ones. We have all kinds. Things like sprites, nymphs, dryads. It's all in this region. And this is what the region represents, fairies. Also, you don't have to be a fairy to be here, but that is a common theme of this region. Like if you know, like people from Europe, not everyone is the same, and not everyone is like European. Some people are like from other regions too, because people travel. But obviously, the characters of these places are obviously like Winxified. So if I mention like an ancient fairy or a modern fairy, they are going to look like animated as a Winx. Also, additionally, male and non-binary fairies also exist within the region. No matter what species you are, you can be any kind of gender. You can identify yourself as anything as you want. So if you imagine yourself as a fairy, that will be accessible as well. Region 4 is called Saban, and is geographically equivalent to North America. So Saban is home to species such as Power Rangers or Rangers, Paladins, Knights, Soldiers, Wizards, Magicians, superheroes or fantasy heroes. The main theme of this region is heroism. And people in this region heavily use sci-fi, fantasy, and as well as techno magic. There is abundance of techno magic in this region compared to the other regions in Magix. And just like any other races or species, you can be any gender to be those species. By the way, the region is called Saban. It was inspired by the company called Saban. The people who made the Power Rangers. The first region is going to be called Bangladesh. I think the name of this region is just perfect. And I can explain the reason why. So, first off, this region is geographically equivalent to Asia. So, Fairyland is Europe, Saban is North America, Bangladesh is Asia. And I think the name of this region, fits so well. Just so you know, this name, was inspired from Monster High. There is a country in Monster High called Bangladesh, and I think it's a genius name. And Bangladesh is based on the real country called Bangladesh. And that country is based on Asia. So geographically speaking, I think it's fitting that I named this whole region Bangladesh. Side note, I feel honored that in Monster High, one of the country is called Bangladesh and it's based on a country called Bangladesh. Given that like I am Bengali and it's nice to see a representation from my ethnic background. There's barely any representation of my ethnicity in media, especially in kids' cartoons. In most cases, you'll notice that India gets the more representation compared to Bangladesh. So, what type of people live in Bangladesh? So, most of these people are basically witches, sorcerers, wizards, magicians, vampires. Basically, if you think of creatures from Monster High, they are basically based in this place. So the main theme of Bangladesh is that people really use dark arts and dark magic. The people love to embrace the darkness. Know that you don't have to be those sort of species to practice dark arts. You can be any other species as well to practice dark arts. But these sort of species are commonly known for dark arts. And just because you practice dark arts does not mean you're evil. Anyone can be evil and anyone can be good. I also thought naming the region Bangladesh, however, I did not really like that title. So Bangladesh it is. Okay, we have 5 regions so far. We have Light Rock, Shadowhorn, Fairyland, Saban, Bangladesh, and now we got the 6th region. And I think I'm gonna call it Miscellanea. Fun fact, there's an actual island in Earth called Miscellanea. So I want this region to replace South America. So I want this region to be home to miscellaneous creatures. So any creatures that don't belong anywhere else, they can go here. So things like elves, leprechauns, trolls, ogres, orcs, or some monsters that can't be identified, they can go here. But honestly, anything can go here. It's a miscellaneous region. The 7th region is called Maryland, and this region is replacement of Oceania. So Maryland is home to creatures such as mermaids, selkies, and other marine life. In the Winx universe, mermaids are quite different. I think like anyone can be a mermaid. It doesn't have to be a female. It can be a non-binary or male. It can be anyone. And while we do have regular mermaids, there are different types of mermaids based on different species. So you can have mermaids that kind of represents rangers or specialists, or mermaids that represent witches, like sea witches. We also have things like salkies and sea monsters. Think like monsters from Luca. So in a way, Maryland is underwater version of the rest of the regions. I also like the name Maryland. It's based on a cookie company called Maryland in the UK. And I think it's a cute name and I think it fits mermaids really well. And the 8th region is called Wildlands. And I want this to be above Shadowhunt. You know how like Africa is kind of above Antarctica? And yes, this is kind of replacing Africa. And so, what is Wildlands? You know, in season 2, where the girls go to Wildlands to earn their charmix. This is basically what this is. It's kind of like a paradise area, like a resort realm. You know when the tricks tell us like where they get the monsters from, and they summon monsters from that area? Well, we can say that this is where they usually come from, and I think Wildlands is home to most mythical creatures, things like minotaurs, centaurs, griffins, dragons, phoenixes, werewolves. Most of the animalistic mythical creatures, anyway. Also, I think it's fitting that this region kind of replaces Africa, since Africa is known for like most wild creatures like lions, hippos, zebras, giraffes, and other animals like elephants. So let me bring you back to the hexagonal grid as our guide. This should represent how the regions are placed. So the purple is Light Rock, the red is Shadowhorn. So going clockwise in the middle, the cyan one should be Fairyland, the black one should be Bangladesh, the blue one should be Maryland, the orange one should be Wildlands, the green one should be Miscellanea, and the yellow one should be Saban. So what's going to be the 9th region? Well, firstly, I'm going to mention that this region is going to be the center of the Magix. So it's kind of below Fairyland, but above the Wildlands. And I think I'm going to have this region be like a small islandic region. Kind of like how UK is in Europe. And I kind of want this region kind of replacing UK, so it's kind of representing that. But of course, it's not going to be in the same area as, Fairyland. It's going to be below Fairyland. So, what is this region going to be called? And I have an idea for the name of this region. I'm going to call it Magic's Capital. The name is kind of inspired from Hunger Games, where the center point of Panem is capital. And it's kind of a combination to all of those things. And guess what? This is where Althea would be from, as well as the other popular magic schools. And at the center of Magic's capital, it's going to be called Magic's Capital City. And it's kind of the capital city of Magic's capital. Kind of like how London is a capital city of England. So in Magic's capital city, this is where the most popular, secondary schools will be from, as well as, primary schools and colleges and universities. They would be based in here. But, it's not only those things either, and also that's not the only places where schools would be. Like, if we had to be realistic about any planet, schools would be anywhere, no matter if you're from London or a different city like Manchester, you're gonna have schools wherever you are. So obviously, in every city, they're gonna have their own version of their own schools. However, the Magic's capital city is known for the popular ones and the most famous schools across Magic Dimension. And just like any city, town, or village, or whatever, is the area isn't just consists of schools. Obviously, they're going to be homes or airports, town centers, malls, shopping centers. Obviously, it's gonna consist of those things because it's a city. We have to be realistic here. Like in real life, um, life is more than just being in school. And this is where I think I'm gonna wrap up this presentation, as well as Professor Ripley is going to wrap up this presentation. I think I've covered all 9 regions of Magix, and I've explained Magix really well. I think in my next episode, I'm gonna get I think I'm gonna explain the skills of Magic's capital city. This is because I don't want this video ending up 1 hour long, and I don't want this being like a chore to watch for you guys. Because I want this to be fun, and I think if it was me and I watched a 1 hour video about this, I don't think I personally would have watched it. So that's my headspace. And I also think it's appropriate to talk about the skills in the next episode because it will be more fun to talk about just the skills. And yes, there's more than 3 skills in Magix. At least the popular ones that I'm going to talk about. So just so you know, it's not just going to be Althea, Cloud Tower, and Red Fountain. There's going to be other skills. Well, I think what I'm gonna say is I think since those are the popular schools, I think we're gonna make it like a favoritisms about these schools. So yeah. So just to run things down, we have Light Rock, Shadowhorn, Fairyland, Saban, and Bangladesh. We also have Miscellanea, Maryland, Wildlands, and Magic's Capital. And that's how we can wrap up this presentation. Professor Ripley, takes off her computer and she leaves. She also gave everyone the timetable so everyone can be punctual to their lessons. So after all that, the students should be heading to the next, break time, and after break time they should head to their second class, and this is how we end the episode. It's just the students leaving, and this is how the day ends. And remember, it's Tuesday, so I think everything's back to normal with your schedules. And just for your information, the next lesson would be Techno Magic, PE, and Art. Anyway, goodbye. So I guess I'm gonna end the episode with the students coming out from the assembly hall. So they're heading for the break time, and yeah, the episode ends. Roll the end credits. And I guess I'm done with this episode too. Thank you for taking part in watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed the episode. So if you have, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and have a lovely day.